These are my top 3 best Nikon lenses for landscape photography. Whether you're looking for a wide angle, telephoto, or an all-rounder, I want to show you what the best of the best looks like for landscape photography by a landscape photographer. So let's start with the first lens and talk about the Nikon Z 14-30mm f4s. The Nikon Z 14-30mm f4s is a great lens and has a ton of upside for landscape photography. It's been my wide angle of choice for the past 5 years because of its super wide focal length of 14mm on the wide side, which is perfect as my wide angle lens because 14mm is more than wide enough to capture so much of my subject into the frame. It's a nice focal length, especially when you want to include foreground elements, since it will help exaggerate the subjects at the edge of the frame, giving more perspective to just how far the background subject is. Having a wide angle lens is perfect for building complex compositions that include so many different elements. It's especially nice for when you're capturing subjects that are close and quite large, like when shooting a beach cliffside. 14mm is more than wide enough to get the job done. And because we're using a zoom lens, we also get access to the zoom range that can help to eliminate unwanted subjects in the frame by zooming in a bit. High majority of the time when using this lens, I just focus on having the widest focal length possible. But in a pinch, being able to zoom can be nice when you don't have many options to move your camera. And unlike other wide angle lenses that suffer in the image quality department, the 14-30 doesn't have that issue. When shooting at f8, we get essentially negligible vignetting despite how wide the lens is. It's great for when you want clean shots of your scene without needing to worry about having to clean up the edges in post-production. This gets you nicer looking images that are more pleasant overall. However, if you're using ND filters with the 14-30, you will see some vignetting, especially when using strong ND filters, like a 10-stop for example. At that point, the wideness of the lens will capture the vignetting, but it's more of an issue with the lens's focal length rather than the lens's optical performance itself. But a big plus with this lens is that it's very sharp corner to corner. The lens will resolve plenty of detail in the centers and the corners, which is nice for landscapes in particular, since we want as much detail as possible. And when I shoot at f8, it's arguably the sharpest wide angle lens I've ever used. Also, the reason why I always talk about shooting at f8 is because that's where I shoot majority of my landscapes at, as f8 stops down enough to get the best results optically, but also avoids diffraction. Something to note is that the corners will have a bit of smearing at the parts of the image where the subject is close, but this tends to be pretty normal for wide angle lenses because of how they tend to distort the edges of the frame. The lens also has fantastic color reproduction, where blues and greens look very natural and accurate, where the images pop right out of the camera with tons of vibrancy. We get plenty of micro contrast throughout the image with a lifelike feel to the photos. And put simply, the lens produces fantastic images. They're as close as it gets to perfect for a wide angle lens and is probably the best one that I've ever used. The lens also boasts an 82mm filter thread that makes it easy to just throw on ND filters without needing a step-up ring, which is nice since you'll be using a ton of ND filters with wide angle lenses in general to help capture long exposures. I do want to put a quick note on this lens's build quality because this is a strong suit of the lens. It has a retractable mechanism that makes the lens smaller when packing away in your camera bag. For landscape photographers, this is a nice design since we can now fit more gear into our bag without worrying about our lenses taking up too much space. And since it's made out of metal, it's helped keep this lens in working condition for the past 5 years. The durability of this lens is something that I want to make a video on in the next couple of weeks because I've had the 14-30 for the past 5 years and it's a lens that came out when the Z mount was first introduced. But that's for another time. And now we can move on to a lens that actually makes a great complement to the 14-30, and that's the Nikon Z 28-400mm f4:8 VR. This is my favorite telephoto lens for landscape photography, and if you just look at the focal length, it's not hard to see why. Because having a 28-400mm focal range in a single lens is just ridiculous. You can go all the way wide from 28mm to long telephoto at 400mm in one turn of the zoom ring, which is just ridiculous, as 400mm is quite long and perfect for isolating your faraway subjects. And no matter what situation you're in, you can always capture your subject no matter what. But let's say you put on the 28-400mm onto the Nikon Z30, which is an APS-C size camera. This gets you an insanely long focal range of 42 to 600. Of course, 600mm might be a bit overkill, but can get you niche shots that you wouldn't be able to get with a shorter lens, like images of the sun setting when it's much lower in the sky. 600mm is great for this scenario, as it helps to make the sun much larger and a bigger part of the frame. Of course, it is rare to need that kind of focal length when shooting a landscape, but it is there if you do need it. However, you do need to be mindful though when shooting at a 600mm focal length, as that causes more atmospheric conditions to come in between you and your subject. Because the more you zoom in, the more apparent those atmospheric conditions will get, and will lead to a reduction in sharpness as well. The 28-400 is nice, not just for the long focal range, but because it also has a standard focal length of 28-70 in it. It's perfect for when you want to capture a composition that's got elements that you want to exclude, but still want a wide enough focal length to capture all these subjects you intend to include. And you know how I said earlier how pairing the 28-400 with the 14-30 makes an incredible combo? Well, a huge reason for this is that when using them together, you get a 14-400mm focal range that has zero gap. This is amazing, as in landscape photography, having no gap means you have more access to the focal lengths you want to use to capture the subject. Image quality is where this lens tends to fall off a bit, and honestly, it doesn't really compete with something like an S-line lens. And a big reason for this is that the 28-400 just isn't as sharp as something like the 14-30. There's a little bit less detail in the image around the frame, but there's more than enough resolution in the image to support any Nikon camera. We do still get pleasant colors that look good and are very in line with other Nikon cameras. When we take a look at the 28-400mm build quality, we'll find a mostly plastic build throughout the lens. But however, we do have a metal mount at the bottom. In my year of using this lens, I haven't had any major build quality issues, which is really nice, especially because you're going to be using this lens in some pretty rough conditions as a landscape photographer. But the strong suit of this lens's build quality comes with the size and weight. I mean, take a look at this lens. It's quite small for a 400mm lens. It packs right into my Shimoda Action X30 without an issue, and leaves plenty of space for other pieces of gear. And with the locking mechanism, we avoid having the lens zoom out unintendedly inside of the bag. The lens itself weighs a mere 725 grams, which is quite light for a 400mm lens, which is twice as light as the 100-400mm, which is 1435 grams. The build of the 28-400 is actually quite impressive, and it actually makes it palatable to carry around a 400mm on landscape shoots. This plus the 14-30 is what I normally bring with me when out shooting landscape photography, and has been my favorite camera combo when out on shoot. But before I get to my last and final lens, I want to address a comment that you guys keep on making about my hat. Because a lot of you guys keep asking what this box is on the side of my hat, and well, it's actually a microphone. But not just any microphone, because this is the Saramonic Ultra. And thanks to our partners at Saramonic, they sent me this mic for me to unbox, and I instantly fell in love with the textured feel of the case, which also helps keep the system charged and makes it easy to pack into my bag. And it's great that it's easy to travel with, but how does it sound? Well, throughout this entire video, this mic is what I've been using to record all of my audio, and it sounds great. It also has 32-bit float recording, built-in timecode, and IPX5 water resistance for the transmitter for an incredible audio recording experience. And with the built-in clip on the back of the mic, I can easily clip it anywhere without it taking up too much space, like on my hat. So if you're interested in the Saramonic Ultra, feel free to click the link in my description or in the top right hand corner. And thank you to Saramonic for partnering with us in today's video. But now let's go back and talk about the Nikon Z 24-120mm f4S. If you are looking for a lens that makes the best single lens setup when out shooting landscape photography, then the Nikon Z 24-120mm f4S will be your best bet. With a great all-around focal length of 24-120, you get the best of both worlds as the lens starts at 24mm. This is wide enough for most scenes while offering a slightly compressed feel to the image versus a focal length like a 14mm. Perfect for getting most of these subjects you want in the frame while being close to your main subject. But when zoomed out to 120mm, this will give us about a medium telephoto focal length. This can still frame subjects that are very far away with space to include other subjects. Granted, 120mm isn't nearly long enough to fully isolate a subject, but to be fair, 24mm still isn't fully wide enough to capture absolutely everything into the frame. This lens is meant to be a sweet spot between the ultra wide and the ultra telephoto lenses, giving you a nice focal range that provides you plenty of leverage to capture your subject in a variety of different compositions. And despite not being perfect on the wide or telephoto side, the normal focal range is perfect for capturing images that still want to include plenty of different subjects while excluding those that you want to keep out. I think having the 24 to 120mm focal range in a small lightweight package makes it super easy to bring along in a 3-liter sling and walk around capturing landscapes on a more chill type of shoot. Being an S-line lens does suggest that this is a top of the line lens when it comes to image quality, but just how good is it when we take a look at the images? When inspecting the images, we'll find that we get superb image quality. And this is probably my favorite out of all these standard zoom Nikon lenses that I've personally used. The images are incredibly sharp corner to corner with tons of micro contrast that helps the images pop. They feel very lifelike and are not flat at all. And especially in Japan, where we had lots of overcast and little lighting, the 24 to 120 gave the images character and lots of room to work with in post-production when it came to how the images looked straight out of camera. The lens performs well throughout the focal range and the different apertures, so this isn't a lens where you have to limit yourself in order to get the best image quality. Which is nice when it comes to vignetting, as we get nice images that are clean corner to corner, and honestly, over everything, the image quality is what pulls me towards this lens. It's simply so good. It makes your jaw drop every time you capture an image. Of course, being an S-line lens means that this thing is built like a tank, with tons of metal all around it and a metal mount. It's built to last a lifetime and feels great in the hands while using it. It's nice and compact and will fit into pretty much any camera bag with ease. The form factor also makes it a great lens to put onto any camera body, as it balances well with all the cameras that I personally have available to me. This lens also boasts a couple of extra controls that other Nikon lenses don't have, like a programmable function button and a control ring. They can be programmed to whatever you like whenever you want to control your camera settings, and are nice to customize your shooting experience how you want. The control, manual focus, and zoom rings all feel really nice to turn, with all of them feeling tight with a decent amount of resistance, so you can fine-tune the settings that you want. It feels good when using the lens and creates a really pleasant experience when capturing landscape photography. But on top of all of it, it's very lightweight, coming in at 360 grams. It is more than light enough to pack out when you're on a landscape shoot. I am a huge fan of this lens, especially if you're a photographer that wants to be minimalistic and pack light. This could be the lens for you. But of course, you can't go wrong with any of them, as these lenses are perfect for capturing landscape photography. It simply depends on what you're looking for. And in my 9 years of shooting landscape photography, I can confidently say that these 3 are the best lenses that I have ever used. I mean, heck, the 14 to 30 has been in my kit for over half of my photography career, and nothing has come out to make me want to switch over from it. But which lens would you consider putting in your kit? I would love to know down in the comment section down below. But anyways guys, if you want to see more content from me, check out this video right here, and thank you so much for experiencing the world with me.